This is my first story. This happened when I was 17 years old. During my last year of high school, my parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me alone in our house. At first, I was excited. Being home alone felt like freedom. Our house was at the end of a quiet street, and at night, everything became completely silent. Before going to sleep, I made sure to lock every door and window, just like my dad always told me to. Around 1:47 a.m., I woke up suddenly. I didn't know why at first, but I immediately felt uneasy. Then I heard it, a faint sound coming from downstairs. It sounded like something dragging slowly across the floor. I sat up in bed, listening carefully. My heart started beating faster. I told myself it was probably nothing, just the house settling. I got out of bed and opened my door slowly. The hallway was empty. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down into the living room. Nothing moved. Everything looked normal. I felt stupid for being scared, so I went back into my room and locked the door before going back to sleep. The next morning, I went downstairs to make breakfast. That's when I noticed the back door. It was slightly open. My stomach dropped. I was sure I had locked it the night before. I walked closer and saw the lock was open. I tried to convince myself that I must have forgotten, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next night, I locked my bedroom door. Around 12:40 a.m., I heard a soft scratching sound outside my door. I froze. Then I saw the shadow under my door change. It got darker. Something was standing right outside my room. I stopped breathing. I stayed completely still as the shadow remained there for several seconds before slowly moving away. On the last night, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps. Slow footsteps coming from downstairs. Someone was inside the house. I listened as the footsteps moved across the living room and then onto the staircase. Step by step, they came closer to my room. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Then the doorknob slowly moved. It turned slightly, but stopped because it was locked. Whoever was on the other side didn't try to force it open. They just stood there, waiting. After a few seconds, the handle slowly returned to its original position, and the footsteps moved away. The next day, after my parents returned, we found something inside the storage closet under the stairs. There was a blanket, an empty water bottle, and food wrappers. Someone had been living there. Someone had been inside the house the entire time, watching me, listening, standing outside my door while I slept. This is my second story. This happened when I was 18 years old. My parents had left for a 3-day trip, leaving me alone at home. The first night felt normal. Before going to sleep, I made sure to lock the front door and the back door. I even pulled the handle twice to make sure it was secure. At around 3:12 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Then I heard a metallic sound from downstairs. A quiet click. It sounded like the front door handle moving. I sat up in bed, frozen. Someone was touching the door. I slowly walked to the top of the stairs and looked down. The front door was closed. Nothing moved. The house was completely silent. Eventually, I went back to my room, but I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, I noticed something terrifying. The deadbolt was unlocked. I was absolutely sure I had locked it the night before. I stared at it, trying to understand how that was possible. The next night, I heard knocking downstairs. Then I heard the sound of the door handle moving again. Someone was trying to open it. I stayed in my room, frozen, listening. On the third night, I heard footsteps inside the house. Slow footsteps moving across the living room. Then they reached the stairs. Step by step, someone was coming upstairs toward my room. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Then the handle moved slowly. Someone was trying to open my door, but it was locked. After a few seconds, the handle stopped moving, and the footsteps walked away. The next day, the police found something in the basement: a blanket, empty bottles, and food wrappers. Someone had been living in our basement, watching me while I slept, standing outside my door at night. This is my third story. This happened when I was 16 years old. My parents had left early in the morning to visit relatives in another city, and I stayed home alone for the night. I had done this before, so it didn't scare me. Our house was small, with a narrow hallway connecting all the rooms. At night, that hallway always looked darker than it should have. That night, I stayed up late watching videos in my room until around 12:30 a.m. Eventually, I turned off the lights and lay down in bed. The house was completely silent, no movement, no sounds, just silence. Sometime later, I woke up suddenly. I didn't know what woke me, but I immediately felt uneasy. I stayed still, listening. At first, there was nothing. Then I heard a faint sound coming from the hallway. It was subtle, almost like something shifting. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe the house settling. But then I heard it again. This time, it sounded more like a step, slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. My eyes locked onto my bedroom door. I watched it carefully, barely breathing. Then, slowly, the doorknob moved. It turned just slightly, then stopped. My entire body froze. I hadn't locked my door. Whoever was on the other side could come in at any moment. But they didn't. The handle stayed still for a few seconds, then slowly returned to its original position. Whoever it was, they didn't come in. They just tested the door. I stayed completely still, listening. After a few seconds, I heard a soft footstep in the hallway. Then another, moving slowly, passing my door. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just listened as the footsteps continued down the hallway. Eventually, they stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. It meant they were still inside the house, somewhere. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed in my bed, staring at the door until morning. When sunlight finally came through the window, I felt a small sense of relief. I got out of my room and checked the house. Everything looked normal. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But when I walked past my parents' bedroom, I noticed something strange. Their window was slightly open. I was sure it had been closed before they left. I walked closer and looked outside through the window. That's when I saw it. On the ground outside, there were footprints in the dirt. Fresh footprints right below the window. My stomach dropped. Someone had been there. Someone had opened that window. Someone had come inside. I suddenly remembered the doorknob moving, the footsteps in the hallway. The person had been real. They had been inside the house, standing right outside my door while I was inside my room. They could have opened it. They could have walked in. But they didn't. They just stood there, listening. To this day, I still don't know who it was. The police were never called because there was no proof of entry. No damage, no missing items, just footprints and the memory of that doorknob slowly turning in the middle of the night. Sometimes I still think about it. The fact that someone was inside my house, standing outside my door, and I never even saw their face. Thank you for watching my video. Please like and subscribe my channel for more horror videos.